Hello, my name's Shade and today I'm going to be discussing the Skullduggery Pleasant series by Derek Landy. The Skullduggery Pleasant series is a children's urban fantasy series that kind of verges on YA by the time we get to the later books. I think all of them are like 11 plus, but we do get into some more kind of young adult themes, I think. They take place in Ireland and they follow a skeleton detective and his partner solve crimes that end up having deeper meanings and bigger world implications, and they end up saving the world quite a few times from all kinds of bad guys and lunatics and other magical threats. This is a magical world. Magic is the thing that makes it fantasy. There are different strains of magic, so you have elementals who control the elements, and then you have adepts who have a whole host of different powers. There are necromancers who deal with death magic. There are people who throw energy beams. There are people who are specialized in symbols. There's a lot of different adepts. The characters are snarky and funny, and the dialogue they come up with is just great. You have the mystery element where they're solving these crimes, and then you have this kind of adventure element where our main character, Stephanie Edgley, who's 12 in the first book, is kind of plunged into this world of magic and but it's also a really dangerous world, and so there's definitely hardcore adventure vibes going on. It just has that really big grand epic feel. The more the series goes on, the more things kind of start to accumulate and build towards a really big end. I read this series, I started in 2012 with The End of the World, which is the World Book Day book for 2012. That's how I discovered Skullduggery Pleasant. So this chronologically takes place after book 6, and it does have a few minor spoilers in it, but it was designed, these World Day books are designed to lure in new readers. So I would have been about 12, maybe 13, I think. And then I continued reading all of the books. I read them quite slowly. There's a lot of them, to be fair. There's 9 books total in the original series. And I got to book 7. I read The Maleficent 7, which is the novella that comes out after book 7. And then I didn't read them. This year, the goal of the year was to reread all of the books in the series that I'd already read and finish the final 2. Now, I will say there is a series that comes out after this one. I've only just collected all of them. They're right there. They're behind me. I haven't read them yet. I'm planning on reading them, of course. I don't know when though. I feel like I need to confess that first. I'm just gonna run through the books really quick. There's book 1, Skullduggery Pleasant. Book 2, Playing with Fire. Book 3, The Faceless Ones. Book 4, Dark Days. Book 5, Mortal Coil. Book 6, Deathbringer. Book 7, Kingdom of the Wicked. Book 8, Last Stand of Dead Men. And the final book, book 9, The Dying of the Light. There is also Armageddon Out of Here, and this is a collection of short stories which take place over the course of the whole series. I read these as I read the books in chronological order because I wasn't really scared of spoilers since I'd read the majority of the books before. There are a couple things I would say with these though if you're going to read them along with the books, and I'll get to that in a minute. There are also 2 World Book Days. So there's The End of the World, which I just talked about. This is actually included in Armageddon Out of Here. And Apocalypse Kings, which came out this year in 2021, but actually takes place during Phase 1, this original series. I believe it took place somewhere between 5 and 6. I think Valkyrie is 16 in this one, so whenever she's 16, that's when it takes place. Then there is also The Maleficent 7, which is a novella that takes place after book 7 and follows Tanith Lowe. Ran about the names. The names, they're made up. There's a whole thing with names in this series. You have 3 names. Your given name, your true name, and your chosen name. There's the name your parents give you when you're born. There's your true name. That is what links you to the magic. There's a lot of lore about that. And then you have the name that you claim for yourself to protect your given name, because if someone knows your given name, they can control you, essentially. And so everyone has made up names because they're all making up their own names. I always thought it was pronounced Tanith Lowe, and then my friend told me back when I was a kid, and I had a friend who was also reading those books, it's Tanith. So I then had to retrain my brain to call her Tanith. And I was recently watching a video where Derek Landy and his girlfriend, I don't know, she mentions Tanith and she pronounces it Tanith, and now I have to retrain my brain back to call her Tanith. If you haven't read these books, I really recommend them. They're kind of like those family films where they're aimed at kids technically, but there's jokes adults appreciate in there. That's what these are kind of like. I have little tidbits and little bits that are kind of confusing and that you have to actually like pay attention to understand. They're so funny, they're so much fun. There's so much peril. There's such a great character development in our main characters and in Valkyrie because they go through a lot. It's 9 books. It's so long and it's not like a clear-cut journey because it's so long. They kind of go a little bit all over the place in that journey. They have a lot of heart and they're just so good. Were the books that made me so excited about reading. When I was a kid, I read the Saga of Darren Shan Circuit of Freak series. Stood the test of time. I still thought about it a lot all the time, even in that gap where I wasn't reading them, and I knew that I had to finish it someday because I loved them so much that I couldn't not know how it ended. And rereading them this year and now finally getting to the end, like it really stood the test of time. It's one of my favourite series. I would say at this point in my life that I have 2 favourite book series. The Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas, which I marathoned last year and adored, and this one. Favourite characters include... My favourite character is Valkyrie. How could it not be Valkyrie? He's the best. I also love Skullduggery. I'm not original in my favourite characters other than those 2. Tanith. Just love her. And especially in the early books, if you know, you know. My love of her knew no bounds. Whenever she was in a scene involved was the best. I love Fletcher Wren. He was my first ever kind of book boyfriend crush type situation. I still love him. I also love Billy Ray. I think he's great. I think his character development and watching his journey was... And then of course I love Ghastly, I love China, I love Dexter and Sakharin. I'm presuming you pronounce it Sakharin, especially I find him hilarious. Oh, can't forget about Finbar. The way characters work in this one's really interesting. There's so many recurring characters. The bad guys, like Billy Ray, keeps coming up. Scapegrace, however you say his name, and Thrasher, they keep coming up. Just they'll find their way to meander themselves in and make themselves relevant. Finbar and Clarabelle, these are very small side characters that we never really see for more than a couple of chapters, but they're consistently present throughout the series, and they consistently have some kind of character growth. The cast of characters is one thing that really makes this series for me because they're all so fleshed out and so interesting. They're just so much fun to be around. Okay, I'm gonna talk about favourites. I'm gonna break it down. Thought about this last night, my least favourite to favourite books, and I have a list. It's different to what it was when I originally read this series, which is interesting. When I originally read this series, for the most part, with each book I thought it got better. Book 3, Book 5 and Book 6 stood out to me, and then Book 7 I don't think I liked as much as Book 6 then when I read it, and I still agree with that now. But I remember in particular Book 3 and Book 5 really stood out to me as they just took it up a level. Book 3 is the highest of the stakes we have at that point. It's kind of the climax of that trilogy, really, if you want to look at it in that way, and it feels like it. 5 is when the books get a lot longer and we switch around perspectives in all of the books. We see the bad guys, we see side characters and stuff. We're not always with Valkyrie, but as the books go on, stray away from our main characters, we see lots of little pieces of the puzzle so that they can slowly click together. Particularly, I think, Book 7 on, there's so many characters by that point that were really all over the place. Not in a bad or confusing way. It's interesting because you're seeing little pieces of the puzzle and little things that don't seem relevant at first. It was just some random dudes talking about something completely random, and then it becomes very apparent quite quickly normally how it's relevant. My list this time is very different. So we'll start from least favourite and we'll work our way up to most favourite. Now I will also say I enjoyed every single one of these books. There's none of these books that I would in any way say is bad. I would in any way say kind of anything negative, really. They all got 8s out of 10 is the lowest I gave any of the main series' books. So my least favourite is only my least favourite because I didn't like it as much as the other ones. There's no reason why it's my least favourite particularly. My least favourite is Playing with Fire, Book 2. It's literally just that there's nothing I think's particularly special about this one, and all the other ones there kind of is. This one is just fun. It doesn't fit into that framework in the way that any of the other ones does. And then at number 8, I think it's Mortal Coil, which is interesting because I was expecting to really love it when I read it. The structure in this one's kind of it's different. It's not bad. I can see why it is the way it is. I just wasn't expecting it to be like that, and I just didn't have as much fun with it as I thought I would. By this point, I didn't remember what happened. Like the first 3 books, I remembered a lot of what happened. I was expecting them to happen as they happened, and it was a lot of fun. And I think from Book 4 onwards is when I started to forget things. It's still good. It's still high stakes. It's still lots goes down. I remember the first time it gave me so many emotions. I cried. I laughed. It was just everything, and I didn't get that this time. I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. So in 7th place we have The Faceless Ones, which is book 3. Again, it's great, it elevates it to a new level. It's the climax of the trilogy. It just didn't wow me as much as my top 5? 6. Wow. At number 6 we have the first book, Skullduggery Pleasant. I had a blast reading this one. It's so much fun. It's the one where it all begins, and I'd never felt that nostalgic for a first book before because it's such a long series. We're seeing these characters as babies and watching this relationship between Skullduggery and Valkyrie form in the very beginning, knowing what happens, was the best. I just really adored it. I think it's a really great first book. At number 5 we have Dark Days book 4. This is the first one that I thought I enjoyed a little bit more than the first one. I just had a newfound respect for it this time around. Like, I obviously didn't think much of it the first time because I was like, book 3 and book 5, no comment on book 4, but book 4 to me this time was the one that stood out to me. The beginning of a path we start to go on, and something that really changes the series. I mean, it kind of starts from book 1, but this is where it kind of gets cemented in. This is when I started to not remember things, and so I was pleasantly surprised by a lot of the stuff that happened. I had a blast. I don't know what to say. They're just really enjoyable reads. At number 4, we have Kingdom of the Wicked. Now this one, I really didn't remember. Literally half of the plot, which was exciting, I cannot deny, but I was also kind of frustrated with this half of the plot because I couldn't see how it linked in to our main objective. And I understand you need that shock value that when you understand why it fits in, but it frustrated me because I didn't care as much. I was so invested in the other half of the plot. That being said, I obviously still really enjoyed it. I still think it's a really strong book. By the time we get to this part, the last 4, they become really strong, I think. 3rd place we have Deathbringer, which, other than book 1 and book 4, this is the one that really stood out to me, and I read this and I was absolutely, with definite conviction, knew that this was my favourite of the series so far. I don't know what it was about it either. I just connected to it in some kind of way. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Things start getting really complicated and convoluted, and I loved that aspect. And I mean, I had a blast. Should I just say it with each book? I love watching the relationship between Valkyrie and Skullduggery, and I think in this one and in book 4, it is really is good stuff. Good stuff. And then we have the final 2. I would give both of these a 9 out of 10 as opposed to an 8 like I would give the rest of them. In 2nd place we have Last Stand of Dead Men, which I always want to say the last stand of the dead men because that is what grammatically makes sense. So this is obviously the first one that I was reading for the first time, and I don't know if the last 2 are higher up because they are the ones that I had to read for the first time, so part of that made it more exciting. But like I said, I didn't remember a lot of what happened in some of the books, but then again, I don't know if I'd remembered parts of what happened, and so that changed what I was expecting from them. Since in book 5, I just thought remnants, and in Kingdom of the Wicked, I was just waiting Armor I knew those were the big plot points. All the other stuff, the little nuances that he does to in his books, I didn't care about because I was just waiting for the big stuff. So that could be something to keep into mind. Whatever. This one is a through and through war book, kind of accumulation of so much goes on in this book. So much is accumulated. I think I counted there are at least 9 different things that have been going on in the series that are starting to accumulate, and they're gonna explode at any minute, and that's all rising in this book, and it made it so stressful, also so exciting because you felt the end is nigh, but it's not even the last book. All this happens in book 2nd to last, so that you know the last book we're gonna have time to cement it out and figure it out, and it's really gonna go down, and I found that so exciting. So many great scenes, so many things that we'd been waiting for that happened. I thought it was really clever. I felt really dense and heavy in the best way because it's a war book. And then my favourite of the series is book 9, The Dying of the Light. It took me a while to decide which one I liked better out of book 8 and book 9, and I don't think it's that I like this one better than book 8. I think it's because it's the last book and there's so much opportunity to be let down in last books, I find, because there's so much pressure. Everything has to wrap up. And then you also want that kind of nostalgia and to be happy with the characters. So many things came full circle, and there were so many of those great moments with the characters. There were happy moments and there were sad moments, and things leave off kind of complicated at the end of book 8. I was so the opposite of disappointed, so happy with this being the end. There were so many clever little things that happened that kind of changed perspectives on things, the way that you were hypothesizing about what was happening and the way it ended, especially now knowing that there's a follow-up series. It ends, and it does feel like an end, and it does, you know, I think I would be satisfied walking away from this one knowing that it's the end, but it also sets up beautifully for the next series. So it's clever, it's good stuff. Just to talk about the spin-off books a little bit, so we have The Maleficent Seven, which is a novella, takes place between book 7 and book 8. In the beginning of Armageddon Outer here, there is kind of a list of the chronological order of all the stories, and then you also have this on the list so you know exactly where to read it. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. It was really fun, but that's just kind of it. It didn't have as much depth as a lot of them because it's just kind of a fun side adventure. It is really relevant. It is necessary to read, I think. We're introduced to some characters that then a really large role in book 8, and just kind of a lot of stuff that happens in here is just kind of mentioned in book 8, and everything will make more sense if you've read it. Quite a quick, easy, fun read. This one does have a fun aspect in that you're rooting for the bad guys, genuinely wholehearted. Are they bad guys? It's the bad guy, good guy thing in this series is really fun because the bad guys are also kind of good guys and the good guys are also kind of bad guys. Really fun how that plays out. And then we also have Armageddon Outta Here, which is a collection of short stories. My favorite one, I think, is The Wonderful World of Jeffrey Scrutinus. It was so funny. I was cackling. Some of these short stories are in the backs of the original paperbacks. I don't think they're in the backs of these new ones. Some of these I'd read before and then some I hadn't. The End of the World is in there, and there's also another, I don't know if it's a long short story or if it's a short novella. There are 2 of those in here. I'll put on screen my actual ranking of the stories. There are no stories set after book 8. They all take place before book 8. And like I said, for the most part, they can be read in the order that they are listed in. Very first 2 take place before the first book, and I wouldn't recommend reading them before the first book because they won't make sense. Across the Dark Plane, we're focusing on the dead men, and we have the most context for the dead men in book 6, so I'd recommend reading that one after book 6. And also I think there are a few other little things that you will find quite satisfying if you read it after book 6. And there's the Horror Writers Halloween Ball, and you can pretty much read that one after the first book. It's just that you need a little bit of context for it. There are a couple that also technically don't take place in the right order. I think Just Another Friday Night happens earlier in this listing than it should. I think it should take place after Deathbringer, and I think Get Thee Behind Me Baba Moon should take place before Kingdom of the Wicked, because they mention something that has only just started happening in the beginning of Kingdom of the Wicked. They haven't solved that mystery yet, so it takes place before Kingdom of the Wicked. And then Apocalypse Kings, like I said, I think takes place around book 5, book 6, when Valkyrie's 16. So whenever you read a book and Valkyrie's 16, then it's then. These are really great, and because you have these little tidbits, they do add something to the series, definitely. I really appreciate having them. And so many of them made a cameo in book 8. Because all the stories take place before book 8, it's like in book 8 he started tying all the things together, and all the little tidbits like finally paid off because they're mentioned and they're relevant in book 8. I kind of wish that was followed through a little bit more, but he had a lot going on. I could have done with book 9 being even longer so we could have some more of that stuff in there. Yeah, and I think that's everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I do kind of want to talk about spoilery thoughts of the series, bits in particular that I like, but I think I'm going to make that a separate video and keep this one completely spoiler free. Like I said, if you haven't read the series, I highly recommend you check them out. If you have read this series though, please let me know down below what your favourite book is, what your least favourite book is, any kind of ranking that you have, what your opinions are on the books. I will try to keep them non-spoilery, of course. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!